Hello and welcome back to the Dicebreaker podcast. This is episode 45.
Because it got derailed before it even started.
Yeah, I mean, as a behind-the-scenes glimpse, I suppose, we always have to pull out of some conversational tangent about...
Well, we usually have to pull Meehan out of some conversational tangent.
Yeah, the last 5 minutes has seen discussion of cat food, corner shops brimful of Asher.
Which is a great tune. But the reason for that, as you say, Matt, is episode 45, so, you know, it was technically topical.
Yeah, sure, yeah. As topical as Brimful of Asher has been in the last 20 years, let's say. I am Matt Jarvis. I'm here to host this Dicebreaker podcast alongside Alex Meehan.
Yeah, hi!
Suddenly lost for words. And, of course, Michael Wheels-Whelan.
Oh, what's up?
Bringing cool back into school.
Dude.
Oh, God. We're here, of course. If somehow this is your first time listening to the Dicebreaker podcast, where have you been? We've missed you, but come on in. You're very welcome. We're here to chat about board games and tabletop RPGs and all sorts of stuff. And potentially a lot of other stuff as well, as almost inevitably.
Almost inevitably, yeah. To be honest, I think we spend more time talking about things that aren't board games than we do about board games.
That's what people want from podcasts, though,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Just the loose semblance of being on topic without actually being on topic. Let's kick off, as we do every week, with what we've been playing. Let's start with you, Wills. What have you been playing recently?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been on, right? So literally this morning, myself and Noli's, for a video that's going to be up on the channel already, I think, by the time that this podcast goes out, we did a Let's Play in our new series of You Haven't Played This, and we played Santorini, which is a bit of a classic two-player game. It's a lot of people's favourites, I think. It's a very, very pretty game. It's sort of like a for anyone who hasn't played it, you kind of play on like this 3D like cardboard island, which is this sort of beautiful shade of green, and you're putting these white block buildings with little blue roofs on top, reminiscent of the Grecian Isle of Santorini. But it's kind of like this abstract sort of like puzzler where you've got two little workers, and on your turn you move one of your workers a space away from itself, and then you have to build a building on one of the spaces surrounding it. So, you know, if you move diagonal and then build diagonal, or you move orthogonal and build orthogonal, whatever you want, but whenever you build a building, you choose the space it's going on, and you add one block. But because these little building blocks fit together, you can make these little towers. And to win the game, you have to move one of your builders, onto the third story of the building. And you can sort of stop people by putting those domes on the roof to stop them being able to move there. So it's kind of like this logistical kind of movement puzzle where you're trying to like jump away from the other player whilst also trying to block them from doing things. And it's always like it's super simple. Like you can learn the rules in like seconds. But it's quite an interesting fun little puzzle to play against people. The thing that mixes it up a bit is you get these sort of god cards, which are basically like power cards. So, for example, we had like Hephaestus, I think, who allowed you to not only build one block, but if it's the first one you put in a space, you can go all the way up to 2 in a single turn. Or there's someone who allows you like different win conditions, like Pan, I think, for example, has, instead of getting up to the third, you can jump from the second story down to the floor to win, or something like that, you know? So you only get like 2 of those, and you pick which one you want. But that just sort of mixes it up a little bit, and there's quite a few in the box, so there's quite a lot of variance each time you play. But it was good fun. I really liked it. It's really cute.
It you who had not played before?
Yeah, so I'd not played Santorini. So I was telling this to Lolis. Ironically, when we went out for which one was it? It was PAX Unplugged. When we went to PAX Unplugged, I met up with my brother because he lives on the east coast of the US. And I bought him a copy of Santorini to play with my niece, and was like, yeah, everyone says it's really good. I've never played it, but everyone says it's really good, and I thought it'd be sort of like a good fit for like a younger player who's just getting into more complicated board games. And I think it's that simple enough thing, and it's pretty enough, and it's brightly coloured enough that you'd really be able to get good mileage out of it with a younger player.
Yeah, the app is also very good if people haven't played.
I've not tried the app. Yeah,
the app on mobile is very pretty. I think helped, like you say, by the fact that it is kind of at its heart incredibly simple.
Mm.
Because I think the
And
physical one
it's
is
like,
just like a big plastic, like you say, big plastic island, and then just like it obviously builds up, right? But it's
yeah, because it's got that sort of like it's the kind of thing that kids like doing anyway, right? Because you're building little blocks. It's got like a Lego feel to it, so I think it would be really popular for younger people. But I had a great time, and I'm 26. So.
But you have the heart of a child.
Yeah, I've got the brain of a child too. In all but body, I am a child. But actually, to be honest, all of the games that I've played since last being on the podcast have been you've never played games, because we also played Welcome to, which is really good. Although maybe I talked about that last time I was on. I can't remember. Did we talk about Welcome to? Welcome to is really good.
I think.
Oh no, I'm going to talk about it anyway. Welcome to is Welcome to is not a roll and write, but a flip and write, which we didn't realise at the time. Which Loli's sort of taught both to me and Johnny. But you're kind of like filling in the house numbers for these streets, and it's kind of like it's like a little logistical puzzle of where you're going to put things, and like it sounds really boring when you describe it. It's like, yes, you're going to be a building project manager, and you're going to be designating numbers to buildings on a street, and you hear that and you think, wow, I'm going to fall asleep. But actually, it's really, really fun and really engaging, and like by the time that we finished, because I think we did 2 games in the video, by the time we finished I was like, I want to do a third one, and I was like half joking but half like I'd love to play another game of this, so I think I might have to get another copy. And we also played King Domino, which I know you loved, Matt. But here's a fun thing: I then went home and played Queen Domino.
Yeah, the superior choice. I hope you agree. There's a lot of people that prefer
like
King to Queen,
version,
and
right?
I think they're wrong.
Yeah, well, because King Domino is just like a very simple game like Santorini, but Queen Domino is more like, all right, let's make this a little bit more meaty, a little bit more chunky. So for
Chunky's always better.
Chunky's a great adjective. But yeah, there's like, so King Domino is basically, you're playing dominoes and you're making these little patches of land and getting points for each one. But Queen Domino adds this whole sort of building and tax mechanic, which I was like, when I was first reading through the rules, I was like, oh no, they've added quite a bit to this. Like there's a fair few like bits of gameplay to learn. I really love the taxing stuff, which is essentially kind of like Carcassonne. Whenever you place a tile, you can put a meeple on it. You get these little bitty little
so
knights.
small. They're so easy
small.
to lose.
They're really cute though. Yeah, you get these tiny little knights, and you can put them on a tile that you just placed to tax the region it's in. So if you've got like 8 different forest tiles next to each other, you get a coin for each. So you get 8 coins, which is really good. But it makes this really nice thing of like, you get this huge region, you're like, oh, a coin to tax this bad boy, here we go. Puts you into a real land baron method.
Yeah.
And you can also pay the dragon, which I like.
You can.
You pay the dragon to go and burn down buildings from the centre.
This lovely family-friendly game where you tax the locals so they're penniless, and then you use that money to pay a dragon to destroy the homes.
Slip a 50 to the dragon.
Also, there's a mechanic where you can put towers down, and whoever has the most towers gets the queen, and she gives you a discount on your buildings. But if you have the queen at the end of the game, you also get bonus points. So you're basically gentrifying as well, which is great.
I don't know if they've changed it since I got my edition, but the queen doesn't fit in your castle. It's like you get the queen, but you've got like a little 3D castle, but she doesn't actually fit. She's like the meeple is just a little bit too wide.
Although
Matt, she doesn't fit in your boxes, okay?
She's too large in charge.
It's her castle.
Well, I don't know. I think because you're placing little towers, which are basically little bits of castle, right? The way that we did it is like whenever you had the more castles, you put her in the most recent thing, like she's having a little tourist visit. She's like, ooh, let's look at the new towers that have been placed since I went here. But yeah, it's good fun. It's really good fun.
Yeah.
To be clear, King Domino, also a great game. I just personally prefer Queen.
Yeah.
I think because it has that extra little bit to it.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Queen Dominoes is you can just play King Domino with it anyway.
Yeah. You can combine them, right? I think.
Well, yeah, but like apart from the building tiles, which don't have crowns on them by default, it's pretty much if you just strip out the like the other components, you are basically just playing King Domino. Like all the components are kind of there. It'd be a little bit weird because you'd have some regions that just don't score, but I guess that'd just be another little challenge for you. But yeah. So
Nice.
there you go.
Yeah.
Queen Domino. It's good. All of them really good. Enjoying it.
Yeah, and if you've not played any of these games, you can go and watch them be played on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we played all of them on Board Game Arena, which is free to make an account on. So they're very, very accessible right now, especially during lockdown, which is really good.
Do you know if they're all free games on there? Because some of them.
Welcome to was a premium one,
Okay.
but I think the way it works is if you don't have premium, you can just wait for somebody else who does to join a game with you.
Yeah.
So you're basically just waiting for someone who's got a subscription to play. But I think even then it's like £20 for the year or something like that. So
Yeah,
it's not too
a couple of
exorbitant.
quid each month.
Yeah.
All right, excellent
There you
stuff. Alex, Meehan, let's turn to you. What have you been playing this week?
Yeah. Hi.
Have we done the introductions bit? This is the second bit.
And I'm Wheels.
I was just being nice to the listeners and the viewers. Yeah, I've been playing a lot of stuff, old stuff, really. I've not really played anything new. So, played some Deadlands, which was good. It's nice to get back into that again. The campaign we've been doing for a few months. It's going to some interesting places. Nothing like really wild in terms of like massive scope, but more just like, oh, I didn't think that cool little thing was going to happen. So, and I'm just like getting more and more into the system. I think the system is just so good, and like it allows you to build a really well realized character that has flaws and like, you know, abilities or skills or like specialities. I think when a RPG allows you to do that, that's the sign of a really, really good one. Because it's like using the gameplay mechanics and the character building mechanics to support like the narrative that you're creating. So yeah, loving that. Played some more Overboss over the weekend. It's good, yeah. Like I spoke about it quite a lot last week. It's a spin-off title to the Boss Monster series of card games. It's a board game. So you've got a board and you have to use different tiles to create your over sort of your realm.
I'm sort of refreshing myself with a webpage here, but yeah, no, it's ringing a bell now. And depending on what tiles you place where, and you've also got little monster tokens. You score points at the end of the game, so it's a very, very straightforward game. You play it; it's very quick to play. It's like 15 to 20 minutes each game, which is really nice. We played using some of the more advanced rule sets and pieces. So we played using some of the more advanced tiles, which was interesting. I think some of them fundamentally work better than others, particularly with some of the drafting elements. There were just some games where I was just getting really unlucky in terms of what was being drafted. And obviously there's just a natural random element to the game, and I'd be interested to see how it would work with more players, because I've only been playing it with 2 people, myself one of those people, just to clarify. I've been playing it with 2 people, me and me.
Me, myself and I.
How many people does it
Hang
go
up in front of a mirror.
up to?
Me and that devastatingly handsome person in the mirror.
Yeah, how many players is it?
I think it's at least 4 players. Again, I don't know the information off the top of my head at the moment, but you can find out on Dicebreaker.com. We did a news story on it. Yeah,
1 to 5. There you go.
up to 5. I thought so. Yeah. So obviously the drafting mechanics with 4, you can choose between 4 different combinations of tiles and monster each go you have. And like sometimes it's great, but other times it just feels like the game is trolling me. And I know it's not, I don't feel like it's the game's fault that there is a lack of choice sometimes. Because, being able to choose between 4 options isn't that bad. It's just, I think, just unlucky sometimes. And to be honest, it creates a lot of hilarity more than anything. I know one time I was just sat there going, "Are you kidding me?" Just looking at what was on offer while my opponent was sat there sort of smug, because they had been getting a lot of really good options. And we played using, there are these Overboss cards you can use, which are like character cards that are pretty straightforward. They just give you an ability you can use when you reveal who you are, and they can give you an objective you can complete to get more points. And I understand why it's offered as a separate mode, because it doesn't do a huge amount to the game. Like, this provides you with, some of them are really stupid, which I kind of like, because I think it plays into the silliness of the game. You know, I will say you can get them dealt randomly, so that might be a case for lack of balance. But again, it's an entirely optional thing. Like, the game works fine just without them. Yeah, it just adds like a new dimension to it. There's still like a large version we need to play that gives you a larger board to use, as well as these command things that you can get that you can use once per game, I think, that allow you to do kind of powerful actions, to like move some of your tiles around on your board and stuff. But I am kind of impressed by just the sheer amount of stuff included in the game. Like, the game itself is not complicated at all, but it just provides you with options to make it a bit more complicated. It was, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if that's why.
Yeah, maybe I'm not 100% sure what version I've got.
I believe it's a retail version.
Yeah. Again, don't quote me on this. Yeah, I think it's more the case of it's just, none of it feels like pointless. Do you know what I mean? Like, even if it is the Kickstarter version, like, a lot of those extra bits that you can get, like, are often like just miniatures or like cosmetic stuff. But all this stuff like adds gameplay elements to the game. They're just not like fully reinventing it or breaking it or anything, which I think is fine, because the core game itself is pretty solid. Like, it just gives you options to play around with it and keep it fresh. It's not the kind of game I would play like constantly, but I would say like it's an enjoyable one to sort of dip into every now and then. And I will say the way it's packaged is a little bit, it's a bit messy. I think the components are really good, but the bag that you put the tokens in is a little flimsy, and it's kind of leaving threads everywhere, which is annoying.
Just shedding.
Yeah, it's just shedding, and like being someone with long hair who lives with who lives with someone who also has long hair. It's like, we've got enough stuff shedding everywhere. We don't also need this small bag also shedding hairs. But yeah, and I also played Root, didn't I, Mr. Jarvis?
You did, yes.
Didn't we?
Yes, we did. Well, I think I was present for this game of Root, but I'm not sure that this week I could be said to have played
No
Root.
gloating this time.
My gimmick's run out. This is it. This is the comeuppance I get.
Yeah, Matt didn't win, as you can probably gather.
By a
Heavy lies the crown, Matt. Heavy
long
lies the
distance.
I mean, I didn't win. I didn't win either, obviously.
At least you got to double digits in terms of score. I didn't even break that, I think.
Yeah, it was rough for Matt. I was the Eerie again. We're playing this random, but for the past few games I've been given the Eerie, which is fine. I like the Eerie. And you were the Alliance, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And we played using the wind map again, which was our downfalls, really, because it's randomised. The sort of, what do you call them? The types of the clearings.
Clearings, yeah.
Yeah, the types of the clearings are randomised with the winter map, which I think we concluded just doesn't work very well, because Root is a finely balanced experience. and having the clearing types randomized just throws that off completely. So for you, I think it was the case of you just couldn't get your access like the clearings you needed to because they were in awkward positions.
Yeah, I did all like I basically screwed up as well, because I kind of trapped myself in a corner because of the different layout of the paths as well between the clearings. But it was also that thing of with the Alliance, you're trying to spread sympathy and put down your free bases. And one of my bases I just never got to play because I really struggled to hold like the closest clearing of that suit to me. So it was, I'm kind of with you in that I like the alternative layout because I think there's an interesting kind of like, it almost splits the map in two and you have to go around the edges to get to things down the bottom. But the randomized clearings, I wish you could just ignore.
I really wish we could keep the aesthetic and just have the same layout.
If you're playing the board game, you can, because then you can just map the random tokens to where they are on the other side.
Exactly, but because we're playing the digital version, it does randomize it for you. For me, it was just a case of I started my first turn in a corner that was all rabbit and fox clearings. And I started the game with 3 mouse cards, which meant that I instantly went into what we call the birdie boiler, which is turmoil. I basically said I'm just freely walking into the birdie boiler, first turn, straight away. It was just really unlucky. My card draw in that game was abysmal. Just I didn't get... I did make mistakes, but I just did not get the cards I needed to do anything.
And you still lost, Matt.
No, our friend who played the Marquise de Cat one. Although my other friend who's playing the Vagabond was almost getting there. They were very close.
It was close between those two. You to be fair, after the first few rounds, which I think were just stacked against you, like you pulled back very well. I just didn't get
I think
anywhere.
it's especially bad for the Eerie if you have a bad start, because they're all about setup. Like, if you can get a good setup with the Eerie, you're flying. But just having those first few turns be bad, it really does slow you down, like, more so than any other faction, I think. So there you go. Root Talk.
Yeah.
Root Toot.
Root Toot.
Root Talk, the podcast within a podcast.
And that's everything I have been playing, Mr. Jarvis. What about you?
Root's about the only thing I've actually managed to play, which I obviously lost, so I'm kind of reticent to talk about it anyway, if I'm being honest. I will say that, because we were chatting about Overboss, I'm not a huge fan of Boss Monster, but I will...
Boss Monster's weird, though, isn't it? Because it's like, everyone seems to know about it, and yet it's really mediocre.
I think it gets a long way on its aesthetic, right? It's that retro video game. But it's not a terrible game. It's just kind of like, you kind of play it a few times, like you get through it, and then you kind of move on to other stuff. But I will, as I've not played anything else really, I will use the opportunity to shout out Unearth, which is another game from Brotherwise, which is the publisher of Overboss and Boss Monster, which I think kind of flew under everyone's radars when it came out 3 years ago, something like that, 3-4 years ago. It's a dice game. It's nothing like Boss Monster. It's not connected. It's not retro video game styled. It has a really nice isometric, almost Monument Valley art style to it. But it's a game in which you roll dice and you have multiple different like forms of dice, so like a D4 or D6, D8, and you're spending those dice to build wonders, which you generally get. It's been a while since I played, so apologies if I get that rules slightly wrong. But I think if you roll low, you get resources you can use to get wonders. And if you roll high, you can claim, I think, cards or locations. But it was one of those games where, when it came out, I was like, oh, okay, it's the Boss Monster, folks. This will probably be, like, all right. But I found myself really, really liking it at the time. Like, it's not going to blow anyone's mind. It's not the most innovative game in the world. But I think it's just... like, we introduced it to multiple different groups, and it was that perfect level of, interesting enough without being super complex. It's got a nice look to it. Because you're using different shapes of dice, like, it's quite nice and tactile when you're just picking between, like, a D4 and a D6.
It's really pretty.
It's a really, I feel like it's one of those kind of hidden gems that more people should check out. So there you go.
I feel like Overboss is kind of on that level of it's interesting enough. But it's not incredible. Like, it's not gonna blow anyone's mind. It's not gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be something I'm gonna be talking and raving about, like, after I've sort of finished playing with it. But I'd say it's a good game to introduce to new groups, and especially less experienced players. The aesthetic is nice. The components are nice. Yeah, I'd probably describe it in a similar way in terms of good, not going to blow anyone away.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a place for that, right? It's like, particularly in the age of massive Kickstarter games that cost £100 and are a lot of the time relatively mediocre in their own way.
Yeah.
Like, these games cost, I think, on Earth was like £25 or something. You know, it still looks really nice, but it's not a huge box that's going to eat up your shelf.
I think Overboss, was it around 30?
I think so. I
Something
think it's
like that. Which, you know, it's fine. You get a decent amount in it if I have indeed got the retail version. Yeah. The components are a nice quality.
Right. But yeah, other than not playing that for several years, I think I mentioned last time I was on the podcast, my friend's game of Monster of the Week has come to an end temporarily. Like, we basically did like a season. We had a particular mystery to solve. We solved that mystery, and we're now taking a break, and we're deciding on our next role-playing game. And at the moment, we're thinking about playing Righteous Blood Ruthless Blades, which is like a wuxia role-playing game, I think from Osprey, which put out Those Dark Places. Like, it's a smallish book, but it's as it sounds. It's kind of inspired by the wuxia genre of like martial arts films. But I'm kind of intrigued to dig into it. It seems to have been put together with like a decent amount of care and consideration.
Yeah, that's always the thing, isn't it? There is kind of like a slew of these like Southeast Asian themed games that are made by white people on Kickstarter. They're all just for like.
Yeah, I can't vouch for it completely at the moment because, like I say, I've largely only had a flick through so far, but it seemed like, looking at the credits, there were multiple consultants listed, and I believe the designer is like an expert in the field kind of thing. So yeah, I'm interested to dig into that. I've also sorry.
I will quickly say, just an aside, on the subject of Southeast Asian themed RPGs, the Zhongxi Blood in the Banquet Hall, the artist behind that game, I just have to call them out because, oh my goodness, they've done such amazing work. Like, it's incredible how much art they've actually done. Like, I'm trying to remember. I wrote a story about. Yes, that's it. Because they're doing the art for Gravwell, 2nd edition. Please, I apologise if I've murdered this name, but Kwanchai Moira, I think their name is. But they've done like Dinosaur Island, they've done Zhongxi, they've done Overlight. Like, if you go on their page, you will see. It's just astonishing, like, how much amazing artwork and like the difference in like design types or like types of art. I was just amazed when I saw like how much like they had done and the variety. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think Dinosaur Island is definitely it. Again, it's a game that I really like, but it gets a long way on its This Is Jurassic Park, but kind of like 90s neon aesthetic. But it's you know, it's thanks to those visuals that it works. Overlight, I heard, is okay, but again, it's very striking to look at.
Yeah, it just looks very, very striking. Yeah.
But yeah, the only other thing I've been doing is listening to the official soundtrack for Bullet, which I backed on Kickstarter, which I think I mentioned a while ago, and it's finally coming out. But it's the game from Level 99 Games, who did, I believe it's Level 99. And I think they did like Millennium Blades and stuff like that. But it's inspired by bullet hell shooters, and Meehan and I played quite a bit of it. I think Johnny may have also backed it. And I really like it. I'm excited for that game to turn up. I still think about it quite a lot because it was one of those games that I think did manage to do something really interesting with its theme and manage to feel like the thing it's emulating, which is like that very claustrophobic patterns of bullets are coming your way and you have to deal with them by shifting around. But the soundtrack, which I was just listening to today because it popped up in my emails, it's just like a Spotify playlist. It's an original soundtrack.
Wow.
It's really good. It was really good working music. I think it's obviously available for free if you want to go and listen to it, even if you haven't backed the game.
Becoming more of a thing recently, isn't it? This whole sort of like, hey, like board games are way better when you listen to music whilst you're playing with them.
Yeah.
Why don't we just provide some?
Yeah. I think as well. Oh, sorry, man.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, just quickly, I think it helps. It's one of those things with Kickstarters as well, where as the budget for what would have been smaller games rise, they're able to get in more art and more kind of contributors that go beyond just, here's the thing in the box. You can then be like, okay, here's like some short fiction, here's some soundtrack, here's, you know, other elements that let you kind of immerse yourself into this game that you have potentially invested, you know, up to £100 or even more in. All right, shall we move on to news?
Yeah.
Speaking.
Let's do
Oh, thanks, Vils. Speaking of Root.
Great idea, Matt.
Speaking of Root, which is something we could say almost every week and get away with. There's the new expansion for Root coming up on Kickstarter. Huh?
Skaven.
It's called the Marauder expansion, I believe. Yes. And it features a rat warlord, which is why Wheels is not whispering anymore about Skaven. And also Badgers, I think, is the other faction. So it's introducing these two factions. Yeah. I believe there might be a new map, but those are the kind of major additions. There are 4 minor factions, which I believe are controlled by the game, essentially. And the players can influence slightly, which includes a bear.
Yes.
And the bear it starts as a thief, I believe. So it turns from a thief into a bear. So it's either robbing from you or tearing you apart because it's a bear. But it'll kind of wander around the map.
Hashtag just bear things.
Just bear
Just
things,
bear things.
Yeah, so there's also... I'm trying to just scan through the story that Chase wrote. So Cole Worley, the designer, I think also said there's a new kind of 2-player set of rules to make it play a little bit better with fewer people, because generally Root is a game that works best when you've got a full table, because everything balances each other out. So there's the Rat Marauder, the Stone Seeking Badgers, new 4 minor factions, including this bear, and it's on Kickstarter as of February 23rd. So yes, I think they previously suggested this might be the last expansion for Root, but I think they have since hinted that there might be more to come for Root. But either way, I really like Root. I'm interested to kind of play around with this. I hope that it comes to the app, because none of the expansions are on the app at the moment, apart from the Clockwork stuff, which just adds different AI. And like a co-op kind of mode, but I would love the other factions to find their way on there. But yeah, I mean,
calling up Direwolf.
Yeah, but this seems really cool. Root is a very interesting game. I think the fact that they've managed to add so many expansions to it, which I say there's 4, but there's multiple new factions now, because everything is so carefully kind of balanced against each other. It's kind of incredible the amount they've managed to get out of this and continue to be interesting in terms of making them all unique and asymmetric.
I would be interested to see how... I've not obviously played a game with any of the expansion faction. I'd be interested to see how they play off other factions and how balanced that is. Because I think, the balance of the game is really the huge reason why it works. And this sounds fun. Warlord Rat sounds like a good time.
Let me tell you, man, it is.
I was waiting for Skaven. I think Cole has said before, which is when they were suggesting this might be the last expansion, that they basically don't want to overdo it. So that is there's a feeling of we're only going to add it if it really makes sense, if it really brings something interesting to it.
Yeah.
Rather than just we're going to pump this out because this game got popular.
which is admirable.
Yeah.
You know, like no point bloating it.
Yeah, I believe the Kickstarter as well will have the opportunity to get some of the past expansions, and the base game, which I think they're generally available anyway. But if folks are looking to get in on it, this might be an opportunity.
If I have like a spare 300 quid lying around, then maybe I can get the game and all the expansions. I don't know what the pledge amounts are, by the way, but I'm just imagining.
I think it's...
They're £300 each, you're right, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Root is relatively reasonable because it's just meeples, there's no plastic miniatures, anything like that.
Yeah.
I think maybe the base game's about 50 quid and the expansions are about 30 each, so...
Yep.
But I don't know what they'll be in this Kickstarter, so... there we go. Moving on, this kind of last week, there is a tabletop RPG on the way based on Avatar The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, also known as the better Avatar series. Come at me.
Matt,
that's the
Wheels
unpopular
and I
choice.
Sat here.
Look, I've actually watched a bit of Korra, and there's a lot of bisexuality, so I stand by that, to be honest.
It also gets much better in the later seasons. It has a little bit of a kind of iffy start.
I can't think of a single product that was made for younger audiences but is popular with adults. There's a single one where people don't go, oh, you have to stick with it for about 4 seasons and then it gets really good.
There's only 3 seasons of Korra. It picks up towards the end. But I think kind of on that note, funnily enough, for those who don't know Avatar The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, they are Nickelodeon animated shows set in a world, but I think the thing they do very well is they explore kind of the trauma and the impact of war, particularly Avatar. It is a kid's show. Avatar particularly, they are young kind of heroes who can control the elements using powers that are known as bending, so like fire bending, earth bending, water bending, so on. But a lot of that show concerns the kind of militaristic Fire Nation, which is basically going to war with every other nation. And it handles that stuff really well. And Korra deals with topics like depression and things like that. And they're very well handled, particularly for kids shows. So
apart from the first season.
Well, yes, that stuff particularly comes into Korra later on. But this RPG is coming from Magpie Games, who may be familiar to folks who've watched the channel because they made the Root RPG, which we played.
All roads lead back to Root.
Yes. They haven't actually confirmed what the system will be that powers this yet, but I think most of Magpie's games are powered by the Apocalypse.
Root was, right? Yeah.
They also did Masks and Bluebeard's Bride.
Yeah, they do. They also do Bluebeard's Bride.
Okay, right. Thank you. I didn't know if I was getting that wrong as I said it.
Yeah, the co-founder created it.
I hope they do sort of pick something a little bit more original, because I think there's some really interesting mechanical things you can do with the setting of Korra. And I don't know if just sort of another Powered by the Apocalypse game is quite as exciting as that might be.
Yeah. As someone who's a fan of that stuff, I'm really intrigued how unique firebending, earthbending, waterbending, airbending feel. Because in the show they're represented by different forms of martial art. And they have kind of different places in the world. So water often represents kind of healing. Fire is obviously quite offensive. Earthbending tends to span off into other things. But in the show, they use them in really interesting ways and go a lot further than just, I can throw a rock at you and you can throw a fireball back. So I think that will be kind of key. But the fact that they are, that Root RPG I thought was pretty good. But yeah, I'm kind of with you, Wills. I don't know if Powered by the Apocalypse, if it's just a bunch of moves.
Yeah, because the interesting thing about the sort of, from what I saw from the Korra seasons that I watched, the bending isn't just a fighting thing. It is sort of a part of the society as well. You have I don't know if this is spoiler territory, but electricity sort of bending as a sort of thing. So they use it for power systems and that kind of stuff in Korra. But yeah, they've been out long enough.
It's they're not major.
You introduced to it in the first episode of Korra, so it's fine.
I'm just sat here on my rock, just going, this is nice. I I've watched about 3 episodes of Avatar,
Well,
and I thought it was all right. So
Avatar took me a bit longer to get going with. It's much more kind of kiddie focused. Like Korra's that little bit more mature. But if you want to watch the shows, you've got a little while, because the Tabletop RPG will be coming out in February 2022, so a whole year from now. They've also, so that will be the kind of core book, and it will be followed by at least 2 supplements based on Republic City and the Spirit World, which are, as they sound, kind of the main capital, and the Spirit World. Which will follow in August 2022 and February 2023. So it's already a year's worth of content kind of coming on the way. And that's kind of what we know at the moment. Like I say, it's specifically described as being both Avatar and Korra. So it sounds like it's not just going to be... It sounds like they're approaching the world as a whole rather than just, hey, you can just be Aang again.
They're kind of different time periods, aren't they? Not super far apart.
Yeah, Korra's essentially like 2 generations after Avatar.
But a lot has changed.
Yes, things changed.
They were quick.
But yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people, there are several fan-made RPGs, because like I say, the bending stuff lends itself very well to essentially classes. So there have been a lot of fan-made attempts. I've read through some of them, and they're really impressive. They do a good job of it. So hopefully, as with the Root RPG, that felt like it wasn't just a quick cash-in. That it was handled quite well. So
yeah, so like the Root RPG, from what we saw, had some really interesting mechanical stuff that they tacked on top of Powered by the Apocalypse. So I don't think it seems like they wouldn't just do, here's Powered by the Apocalypse, but we shoved the theme on top. Like, hopefully they've got some interesting things, like like the Root RPG like asks you to use the board game for certain things and stuff, which is quite cool. So hopefully they do that. What I'm just happy is it's not a D&D 5th edition, because that
also it's being
about
made
as boring as it gets.
It's being made by Magpie, who do interesting things. I just don't they don't come across to me as a publisher who will just like fling whatever out to cash in. So prove me right.
Let's continue this role-playing game train with another Kickstarter campaign. Shock, surprise, for the One Ring, which answers on a postcard, is about Lord of the Rings. It's the Lord of the Rings role-playing game. This is the 2nd edition. So the 1st edition came out like a decade ago, I think, at this point, from Cubicle 7. And a 2nd edition was in the works for quite a long time, then was cancelled, like literally months from release. It was meant to come out, I think, last year or the year before. And they basically said the licensing deal they had with the company that owns the rights to all of Tolkien's works fell apart. So the whole thing was scrapped, like 3-4 months before it was due to release finally, after years of work, which was pretty devastating, both for the company and for the people waiting on it. It was then picked up by Free League Publishing, best known for kind of Tales from the Loop, the Alien RPG, all sorts of stuff. They're quite prolific.
You like Free League are good.
Yeah. So yeah, this is the 2nd edition. It is hitting Kickstarter. I think actually by the time people listen to this, it will be on Kickstarter, because it goes live on the 11th, which, as you listen to this, was yesterday. So yeah, Free League we spoke to them last year about it, and they kind of said that they were taking elements of Cubicle 7's game and including them. It's not been completely rebuilt from the ground up, but it is still, a significantly new addition. They're working with one of the original designers. In terms of the setting, I think it moves forward a little bit, so it's kind of set, I believe, somewhere between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, but a slightly different setting than before. Some of the early stuff will focus on the Shire, which I don't think was completely fleshed out in the previous edition. There'll be stuff on Eriador, and there will be, I believe, a starter set that features the Fellowship. So the timeline, as I say that, is probably very close to Lord of the Rings. But yeah, that's kind of what it is, it's a Lord of the Rings RPG. I think the One Ring, the first edition, was quite well loved. Like I say, people were pretty gutted to see it cancelled. Free League have also confirmed that The Long Dark, which was a adventure that was also in the works for a very long time at Cubicle 7, set in Moria, that will also be finding its way into this new edition, because that was originally meant to come out for first edition, then it was delayed to come out with second edition, then it was cancelled when everything went down the tubes, and now it will come back at some point. But it's been a long journey to get here. But hopefully this means it should finally see the light of day, both the second edition and The Long Dark.
Nice.
Good.
It's the insightful commentary you listen to the Dicebreaker podcast for.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say on it, is it? This is Lord of the Rings RPG.
There was a lot of information as well.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
It's, like I say, it's quite a messy one because there are multiple companies at this point and it's passed through several hands. But Free League, we play daily, and like again, they seem like a company that isn't just in it for the quick buck.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like something that Johnny would probably quite like to DM for a Dungeon Breaker season break. Just saying, or even yourself. Man. Just saying.
I have a copy.
Just saying.
Just saying. I have a copy of the first edition actually, and I've not played loads of it, but this makes me want to dig back into it before this comes out and see what I think.
Yeah. I like the films, but I'm not someone who's hugely into the world of Lord of the Rings. It's not like a fantasy world that I'm really into because it's
generic fantasy,
fine.
right? I think that's part of the once you go past those characters, what do you have? It's like you have the genesis of a lot of modern fantasy. So
yeah, it's not something. I'm sure fans of the world of Tolkien's books and the films, you know, this is great, but it's not really a world that I'm hugely interested in exploring. So it's not like an RPG that I'm really excited for. Like,
I used to work on Total War Warhammer as like a video producer, and like a comment we would always get, because people would always be like, make this game in the comments, as if that's how it works, but they would, like, one of the ones that we'd always get is like, make a Lord of the Rings Total War. It's like,
not just Battle for Middle-earth.
Yeah, it's basically just the Warhammer one in a different setting. Like, it's not going to be very different.
Yeah.
But yeah, that wasn't my decision to make, so.
All right. Alex Meehan.
Oh, Rosie! Sorry, Rosie just did a little meow. It was really cute.
Absolute scream. She's confused by all the snow outside, to be honest. Me too.
She's just going to meow on your bed.
I can't follow up a cat being
cats.
Adorable. Alex Meehan, tell us the latest with the Dungeons and Dragons film.
Oh, Mr. Jarvis. I feel like I've been following this story ever since I was born.
Speaking of things that have just been kicking around for years.
Yeah, for those who may not know, there is another Dungeons and Dragons film coming out. Why add to perfection? The original film was fine. No, it wasn't. So yeah, this film that's reportedly coming out, very specific date of May 27th, 2022.
At 4:27 p.m.
At 4:27 p.m. So late last year, they announced that Chris Pine was joining the production in the lead role. But joining him are Michelle Rodriguez and Justice Smith. Rodriguez is known for her roles in the Fast and Furious franchise of films.
This was a difficult headline for me to read. Dungeons and Dragons film star, Fast and Furious star, Detective Pikachu star.
Hey, Wells.
D&D.
I'm just doing my job. Justice Smith is known for his role in the Detective Pikachu film, as well as apparently the upcoming Jurassic World sequel, Dominion. I didn't know they were making another one.
I think I wiped all
Dominion film
memory.
as well.
Oh, whoa! Can you imagine that?
It would be very
it'd be
bland and
incredibly
boring.
dull.
I'd like it. No, the theme of Dominion is really boring. So the details around like what roles they're actually going to play are non-existent at this point, or at least we don't know about them. Same with Chris Pine. But this film has been through a rocky sort of production period up this point. Just lots of legal battles around the rights
You got
of the
Sylvester
film.
Stallone coming in now as well.
I hope so.
Can you imagine though? Actually,
I want to see him as like a mage or like a
At this point,
like
just
a
cast him
sorcerer
as like
type.
a crag of rock.
you gotta cast the firebolt, Adrian. Sorry, that was one of the worst impressions I've ever done. Carry on.
Yeah, he's just sat in his tower, just I don't know, reading maybe. He's a wizard. Hire me to write the film. I'll do it.
Yeah.
So it's been directed by the people behind Game Night, which was alright. It's like a comedy with Rachel McAdams in it, and produced by Jeremy Lackham, who's worked on several Marvel films. So they've got big names behind it. Other than that, who knows what it's going to be called, what people are going to do in it. We've had a few ideas. So maybe they're listening to those. I hope so.
Yeah, like you say, we've discussed this a few times. I feel it's what now, about a year away. We must see something soon.
It might.
right?
It might just be in production hell.
Yeah.
I mean, it might never come out.
I mean, the fact that they're making announcements about it, to me, suggests that they're still on the path of doing it. It's just like, it sounds like they're making it at the moment, or trying to, and in today's climate, it's a little difficult to film things.
Not if it's all just CGI.
It just whoa, yeah, just see. Can you imagine CGI Sylvester Stallone?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine
it now.
like Sylvester Stallone but in CGI.
They do it like they did Robert De Niro in The Irishman, just
Yeah.
turn him into a 15-year-old D&D player, but with the same gravelly voice.
My favourite bit of that film is like, you can tell these people are incredibly old and they're trying to make them look younger, and like they're doing what they can. But there's the bit where he has to like hit someone on the side of a street with his foot, and he looks like he's like struggling to stomp a can, but they're making noises if he's like broken his arm.
I don't know why they didn't just put baseball caps on backwards on them.
That's it. That's what you need.
Yeah,
That's
just
all you need to make them
CGI
look
those in.
longer. Like, I don't know why you have to use CGI stuff. It's a lot cheaper to get a few
honestly.
baseball caps. Seriously, hire me. I've got some great ideas. I'll make you film one way or another. That's the hot news, the hot celeb news. Matt Jarvis, because that's what the listeners are here for.
Well, you know, the D&D film, I think it will either do... I'm sure it will do very well either way. But I think it's really whether it just turns out to be a massive critical stinker again, right?
Yeah, massive. Pardon my language. Poo. Yeah. I would, to be honest, if it is a poo, I'd rather it be like an interesting and vaguely entertaining one than one that's just like really boring and very by the numbers. And,
Yeah.
Like Detective Pikachu. That film was okay. The
Which
ending was
for a video game film
Yeah,
is instantly
yeah, which
puts
is
it into
high
the
level.
top.
But the ending was so bad, and that's all I remember about it now. Just that amazing, incredible ending. So I want it to be either really good or like a total trash fire all the way through.
I mean, once again, this could all be saved by just giving Danny DeVito a lead role. Like I don't.
Yes. Yes.
Detective Pikachu could have been an instant classic.
That's what D&D stands for.
Yeah.
Danny DeVito.
Danny and DeVito.
Yeah, Danny and DeVito. Yeah. Oh no! I really want Danny DeVito to be in this film, and he won't be. Even if he was in the film, they'd probably make him like a troll or something, or like some weirdo who lives in a hole somewhere.
When we get the movie rights sold for Dungeon Breaker,
yeah,
we can cast Danny DeVito as Tim the Goblin.
He's the perfect mixture of cuteness and also
and disgustingness.
Yeah, and disgustingness. So, apologies to Danny DeVito. I feel like
well, no, he's a character actor, you know, and the characters that he's very good at playing are greasy ones.
Oh gosh!
Right, enough on dunking on Danny DeVito.
Let's move
How
on
dare
to
you? Danny
beloved
DeVito's
actor.
He is a national treasure.
He's also a great director. Matilda is a fantastic film.
It is a great film.
Yeah. And he's very good in it. Alex Meehan, tell us about this new Grizzled game.
Oh yeah, talking of
Grizzled.
Sorry.
That is the adjective I would use to describe Danny DeVito. Yeah. Carry on.
And Sylvester Stallone, to be honest. Anyway,
the Grizzled
is the adjective that Sylvester Stallone wants to be described as. I don't know if it's the one that I would give him.
Right, and come on, let's straighten up here. Yeah, the Grizzled is a series of board games released by Simon.
It makes it so much worse when you pause for the impact.
You need to
You've just got to go straight
through
it.
Simon.
This is why I can't call them anything but come on, because
I did, and then you said it was Simon.
I've never said that. I think that's what they call themselves, maybe. In
It
videos.
is. I think it is officially pronounced Simon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Come on.
which I like to think is the sequel to Seaman, which is a
With
Dreamcast video
Leonard
game.
Nimoy.
Anyway, there's a new entry in the Grizzled series.
Whoever put together the marketing phrase Leonard Nimoy Seaman.
I'm trying. I'm really trying. Yeah.
This just reminds me of. Do you remember that Susan Boyle thing?
Oh,
Where
no,
she had a
where
new
are we
album
going with
out and they put a hashtag out that was Susan Album Party. Nobody thought to look at it.
this? Oh yeah.
Wow, I really didn't think Susan Boyle would come up in this
I didn't
conversation.
think Leonard Nimoy would come into it. I don't...
Oh man.
Oh,
Right.
you know, Leonard is. He's a good person.
Thank you.
You're getting all our opinions on celebs here.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, this game is called The Grizzled We Care. Which, yeah, not a great title, I will say. Yeah, I not a fan. It's so the original The Grizzled was set during World War One, and it's kind of like it's a co-op game where you have to kind of survive the bleakness of trench warfare together as a group. So you have cards you need to play, and on those cards are various kind of threats, as well as negative personal traits you might develop that you kind of have to survive the impact of those, while making sure you don't play too many of the same type, and get through the deck together in order to win the game. So it's not confirmed whether this We Care has the same kind of mechanics, but I imagine as part of the series they probably would.
Looking at the picture, it seems very similar in a way that feels a bit like, did you just go,
Passion?
this
Because
might-
the theme for this game
Yeah.
is very current, let's say.
Quote unquote inspired by current events.
There you go. You have to work together as a team of medical professionals to help ward off dire medical threats in an overburdened hospital. Kind of, gets real close to the mark there. I will be said that for every copy of We Care that is sold, Simon will will donate money to the Doctors Without Borders organisation, which is an international charity that helps deal with medical crises. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Multiple crises.
There you go.
Crises.
Yeah.
Have either of you played the Grizzled book?
No, I do want to though. Weirdly, I saw it for the first time when I went on a business trip to Paradox Con. I don't know why, but they had one table out for it. I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, it looked quite good.
I like the art style for it.
It's really pretty.
Yeah, so I think the original artist, I think, was one of the I hope I'm getting this right. One of the people sadly killed in the Charlie Hebdo attacks. So I think they released the original Grizzled and then an expansion at your orders. And then released like an anniversary edition, I think, with miniatures, and kind of said that would be it for the game because it was so closely tied to the artwork.
Yeah.
And it's a really good game. Like it gets a lot out of very simple mechanics. Like it is tough. It's not super thematic, but I think it fits the World War I theme very well because it is punishing and you can't communicate. So you kind of have to rely on each other, which for me makes this feel a little bit like even slightly kind of off the mark a bit, because there it felt like they handled that very well. And this, it's hard not to look at this and feel like now's maybe not the time
to do something like this. Yeah, I feel like that's exactly why the whole donation thing is there. Like I will say the press release that I saw was leaning incredibly heavily on hey, we're doing this to raise awareness for current events and we're donating money for every copy sold. And I kind of like, one, you could have done this with its own series. You didn't have to do it with the Grizzled because it doesn't really feel like it works. One, because, I feel like the Grizzled is, again, having not played it, having looked into it, it feels like it's its own, very much its own thing. And also considering the artist is no longer with us, like bringing this back just to kind of link it into what's happening right now. We're not going to assume anything, but it is hard not to feel a little bit cynical about the timing and, again, the leaning on the, hey, we're raising awareness. And I'm kind of like, I think a lot of people are aware of what's going on at the moment. And I think a lot of it's just like the, healthcare professionals and what they're doing at the moment in terms of providing support and the amazing work they're doing and what they're going through and everything. And I think, it's admirable, but it's also like...
Yeah, I think there's a way for, board games can approach these difficult subjects, like they can explore them. There are a lot of games that do that really well, but I think you're right in the putting out, maybe they feel like the mechanics really do, they were the best choice, like it really does reflect it. But like I say, it's hard not to look at this and be like, there's timing and like maybe you could have looked at building something from the ground up that feels, quite even more appropriate to that situation. And the fact that it is so kind of bald-faced in how much it's like, oh yeah, you're on the front line, you're dealing with this medical emergency. You can set games in hospitals or have them be about medical professionals without necessarily having to reflect the exact circumstances of right now. Like
Yeah.
Dice Hospital, I think, is like a really good game set in a hospital that doesn't, that feels like it's faithful to the people that work in those careers, without feeling exploitative, I suppose. Or
Yeah.
There's also like, because I mean, like you said, Meehan, like it's the whole sort of raising awareness thing seems a bit po-faced when it's we're all being affected by it.
Yeah, I
now.
think
But
it's a sense of they specifically want to raise awareness to what health professionals are doing and what they're going through at the moment, which they do mention that some of the mechanics in the game are you're dealing with the stress of working in this kind of during these medical crises, and they even mention like there's a chance that as characters you could get the diseases yourself, which obviously all very real things that can happen in hospitals. But I feel like the timing, especially on this, is just not appropriate. Like for example with World War One, spoiler alert, that happened a long time ago.
Well, so what I was going to say was like there's been plenty of medical emergencies like this in the past, which you can, and there are still things that people around the world are still being affected by. Like there was like for example the AIDS crisis. Like there were a lot of like breakouts of quite deadly diseases where a lot of people did have to go through some pretty traumatic amounts of work to get people and society back on track. So that seems like a thing that you could potentially raise awareness about, because it's something that might have slipped away from the knowledge of the greater public, and it is also a historical theme that fits like the shoe of the Grizzled. So it seems like there were steps that were taken that could have maybe just shifted to the left or the right a bit to make this a little bit less odd.
They could have even like just done an expansion for the original, but including like medics, like wartime medics or something like that. I feel like this, again, not making assumptions, but I feel like this is calculated, and it's like
I think you're right in that there are ways to recognise the work that medical professionals do every year, but particularly this year, without having to almost be so upfront about like, oh, it's right now, you should buy the,
they don't mention like COVID, for example. They just mention medical emergencies.
It's
or
also
crises, and it's like
they cynically just calling it "we care" as well is like a really. It just
one, it's
a
a bad
smacks
name,
of like,
and two,
it's a bit like a Facebook alert, isn't it? It's not like
I think it's like thoughts and prayers.
It's the emoticon that Facebook added. That's like a little.
We've added a hope care emoji. Like, but it is just like, if to say, hey, we're making donations, good. Like, I'm glad you are, but if you're still profiting off it, it's not raising awareness. It's making a business decision. So like, I think at some point you have to be a bit more like responsible with the wording around it as well, because this is not like a charity board game. This is a game that they will make money off, which will also benefit charity in a way. That's an important distinction.
They haven't confirmed how much they'll be donating either for every copy, so like presumably they're going to make some profit from this. So it doesn't sit that comfortably with me. But
I mean, again, like
I'm sure the intention, there are good intentions involved.
And it might be that when it comes out, it is actually handled very well, and we're taking it at face value. We're only going by what they've put out so far. But the impression so far is just kind of like it feels off. Let's move on because there's actually quite a lot of news this week, and we are swiftly running out of time. Very quick one.
Aren't we?
A very quick one here. Hasbro put out one of its earnings calls, and it said that Magic the Gathering and Monopoly had their biggest year ever in 2020. This kind of follows a story we ran a couple of weeks back from an analyst, Euromonitor International, which said that basically board games have boomed during lockdown, which I don't think will come as much of a surprise to anyone. Euromonitor at the time particularly said that folks were going back to games they're familiar with, so things like Monopoly. And in this Hasbro earnings call, they also mentioned Jenga, Connect 4, and Operation as enduring, quote, stellar years. D&D, which Hasbro owns via Wizards of the Coast, as with Magic the Gathering, also did well. So yeah, that's basically the long and short of it, is just kind of confirmation of what I think some folks may have suspected already, is that while a lot of people are at home, in a lot of cases with families or partners or whatever it may be, quite a lot of people are finding time for board games or turning to board games. So yes, this follows, by the way, we reported last year, I guess it must have been, that 2019 was the biggest year for D&D in its entire 50-year history. So I don't think they specifically say that D&D had its best year ever, but it also just highlights that basically, like, tabletop games continue to grow and grow and grow. Like, more people are getting into them, whether it's through picking up D&D through Stranger Things, or just like getting into party games, then finding kind of more hobby kind of style board games through that. But we don't often get this kind of reflection in the tabletop industry compared to industries like video games, where companies often put out kind of reports about how they're doing a lot more regularly. But yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised that Hasbro is really big and making a lot of money. But I think it is especially interesting, the games that are kind of doing very well tend to be those classics that you might suspect everybody owns Monopoly at this point, but it continues to thrive, clearly.
Yeah. I don't know, I just feel like those kind of games are the ones that people buy because they're like, oh, we're stuck inside, let's do something. And then they'll play it maybe like twice, and then they'll be like, well, that was fun. And then they'll go and rot in the cupboard where they belong.
Well,
it's good to know that tabletop games are doing well, because that means I get my job.
Yes, that's good news for us specifically.
In summary, board games good, more people playing board games good, corporate monopolies bad. Let's move on.
Finally on the news list, another kind of slightly fun one that Chase reported. Someone created a mod for Wingspan, Elizabeth Hargrave's board game about birds, and changed all the birds to Pokemon. So this is on Tabletop Simulator, so it is a mod. It is obviously not official, it's not from Stonemaier Games, which publishes Wingspan, but they swapped everything out. It's called Pokemon Nursery, which is quite sweet, and it follows a similar kind of thing in that you're still laying eggs, which I guess is slightly odd for some of the Pokemon. I haven't seen all the cards.
All Pokemon lay eggs. All Pokemon lay eggs.
They all egg laying.
Yeah, they all lay eggs.
They all have
Pikachu
blackets.
squeezing out an egg.
Oh God! You had to go there. I will ask: are like some of the Pokemon specifically birds? Because there are plenty of bird Pokemon. In fact, I can see Moltres.
Straight in the picture
Moltres is in here.
Yeah, there's Moltres.
Although I guess Moltres is a bird. It's like a legendary Pokemon.
It's a flaming chicken.
It's two very different things.
It's a KFC.
So this is from a user on Reddit, posted this, Lockwinghong, sorry. I was trying to say horn at the end there. So yeah, they completely rethemed it. I think that the gameplay is the same. So the only major change to the gameplay is that instead of comparing Wingspan of the birds, you now use the Pokemon elemental types. So fire, lightning, water, etc. But one of the interesting things about this is that Stonemaier kind of gave it their blessing. So obviously, Tabletop Simulator mods, not all of them are official creations. Many of them are not. There are a number of Pokemon-themed mods of other board games that do not exist in real life. But this was created, and then Stonemaier basically reached out. Lockwinghong reached out to Stonemaier to ask for permission to put it up, and they said yes. So you can go and play it for free, and know that the publisher's kind of okay with that.
Yeah,
it seems a really well considered mod. I mean, like I say, it's not changing the gameplay; it's mainly visual. It's the first 151 Pokemon, but it fits well. So who knows? Maybe at some point
Yeah, I can't wait for Nintendo to do a class action lawsuit on Simulator.
Oh yeah, they're going to do that. I'm just enjoying looking at this picture of Slowpoke. Slowpoke.
All right.
Yeah, Slowpoke is just living life to
He does look like he's at a sleepover. Which, I mean, this is an audio podcast, so that's not very helpful. But
that's Slowpoke's kind of vibe, though, right?
Yeah, Slowpoke is chill. Slowbro is not.
Yeah.
Slowbro has had its...
bro in anything. Around.
Yeah.
Slowbro's got the big old shell on its tail, and the shell is very aggressive.
You'd be concerned if your tail had been bitten by a parasitic shell as well, wouldn't you, Matt Jarvis?
I suppose.
Well, they say that the shell is actually a metaphor for toxic masculinity, and the weight of the shell brings down the slow bro.
The bro, yeah.
But yeah, Wingspan's really good. There's obviously the official app, which I think is a really good app. We played it on the channel a little while ago. But if you're looking to just try out this game, this seems like a good way to give it a go before you maybe get the app or the actual thing.
Yeah. And then the game will teach you about actually like real life creatures.
Yeah, that's the point.
Exist.
So I think this does have information from the...
I love Pokemon! I'm just doing a joke.
I think the Pokemon cards do have information from the Pokedex on them. So, but it's not read out in a very calming voice.
It's really lovingly made.
Yeah.
The design's really nice as well. Like, a lot of effort's been put into it, clearly.
Yeah.
It's really pretty.
That's it for news this week. Let's move swiftly on to emails. If you've got an email for the Dicebreaker
Email!
podcast, you can reach us at podcast@dicebreaker.com. I was so shocked by Meehan's exclamation of email that I forgot our own email address. But it is podcast@dicebreaker.com. Of course you can, Wills.
Hello, Dicebreaker 2. I'm Michael Page. A couple of podcasts ago, Johnny was talking about his backlog of Doomtown Reloaded expansions, and this got me thinking. I'm a fan of a couple of LCGs, such as the Marvel Legendary game, but struggle keeping up with the expansions. Often they include characters or new playstyles that entice me in, and there's a certain fear of missing out in knowing that often when these expansions sell out, you have to wait a long time for any reprints. Have any of you experienced this before? Is there a game where you've been awash in a backlog of expansions, or have been lucky enough to break free from this? Thank you, Michael Page.
Thank you, Michael Page.
Master Wayne.
And apologies. I tend not to be that fussed by expansions for games. On the most part, I think generally if I like a game, I'm quite happy with the game that comes in the box. The exception to this is Mansions of Madness, which my wife and I have made kind of an annual habit, although they didn't put one out last year, of getting each new expansion as it comes out, because they normally come out in November, December time, and then we play it over the Christmas holidays. But that tends to be because those add new scenarios. It's a very kind of story-driven game, so there's kind of like a reason to pick them up. Because if you keep playing the same stories, you can kind of just wear out on them. But for most games, I think if there's not a strong kind of narrative thing like that, like the core experience should be enough to tide you over. I was tempted for the Arkham Horror card game, but a lot of the living card game stuff it's just a lot to keep up with. It's kind of like Magic in that you have to be dedicated to that game, and partly because of this job and partly because of who I am. That's not for me.
I've never really been a big expansion buyer. Like, even in video games, like I don't really play much DLC. Like I think usually I'm just like, cool, that's the game, and I like the game, and I don't think I've really been much of a person that gets enticed by expansions all that much. I'm trying to think of one that I've got at least one or possibly more expansions for, and I'm struggling. I've got an expansion for Inish, but I still haven't used it because it's just sort of like, I feel like a lot of the time when I play games, I'm kind of introducing them to people, so expansion seems like expansions I feel like more for games that you play over and over again with a certain group of people, and a lot of the time I tend to be introducing new people to games, so I think that probably might be why. But yeah, I can see why you would be like, especially if you have something that you really love and you play a lot and you get that sort of collective vibe. Like I have a million different miniatures that I haven't painted, I can tell you that, and I still keep getting them, you know. So yeah, I can see where that comes from.
I think so obviously Johnny was talking about Doomtown, which is that's like more of a collectible card game, isn't it? Like
I think it's I think it was originally a collectible card game, and then when they re-released it, it was a living card game.
yeah, I
right.
think what I'm saying is Doomtown is competitive. Like
Oh,
you
sure,
play
yeah.
against someone, which means that like keeping up with it is important to staying in the meta. Being that like if you don't have some of the expansions, particularly the newer ones, it might feel like you're not, capable or prepared of, being able to play against other people who might be more up to date with releases. When it comes to something like Arkham Horror, the card game, I think it's less of an issue because that's a card game. So it just really depends on what kind of character decks you want to get and what kind of scenarios or locations you want to play through. I don't play any living card games on the regular. Like I've dipped my toe into some, including Arkham Horror. I think it's something for me again because like Matt said, because of my job. Like I spend a certain amount of time playing tabletop games. I can't really dedicate a huge amount of my time to something like Arkham Horror, which requires you to kind of really keep up with it. Also, money is an issue.
Yeah.
Like in terms of expansions, like Wills and Matt, I'm not hugely into them. I won't just get them because I have the base game and I want to collect. I know some people get them just to collect, all the bits. I will say it just really just depends on the expansion themselves. Like some are really great, like the Widow's Walk expansion for Betrayal, I think is excellent, and it just like enhances the game so much. Whereas like others just bring like little nice bits to it. I really want to play Root with some of the expansions. Again, that's a game I play quite a bit, so I kind of feel like maybe it's worth investing in something like that or experiencing it in a different way. I think those kind of games are the ones that I would really be drawn to in terms of getting the expansions, and if I had an idea if the expansions were worth it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Cool. All right. Let's move on to this next one from Shah. Alex Meehan, would you like to read this one?
Yes, I will read this one. Shah says... Shah is also Michael Caine, right? Yeah. I can't do that voice, so I'm not even going to try. Hi, Dicebreaker team. I have a question for you around world building and inspiration for it. I have been homebrewing my current D&D campaign, which I love doing, and it's meant that I felt less constrained by planning. My question is, where do you gather your inspiration for world building from? Different fantasy novels or pop culture? Have you done deep dives into history? Or things like Nordic or Greek mythology? Where do you think the best expansion for world building and homebrewed quests can be found? Thanks, Ashar.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't know if because the thing is with world building is I tend to do it sort of per adventure rather than like I'm going to make an entire world and then we're going to do lots of adventures in it sort of thing, which I think is more what Shah's talking about here. I don't know if either of you have done something similar.
I'm kind of similar to you in that I think just because of the nature of the RPGs that I play, like a lot of the time it's in an existing universe, so some of it's set out by that, and like we'll kind of carve out our own space for it, but the general kind of strokes, we're not creating a world from scratch, we're just kind of creating places in it. But yeah, I think it's that thing of I will pull from things I've watched or things I've read, but they will tend to be like singular ideas for characters or story beats, and they'll all kind of get blended together rather than be like, okay, I want this whole thing to be Norse inspired or Greek mythology inspired, because like a lot of the time the RPG kind of defines that. So it's like if you're playing Aegon, it's like, well, we're in Greek mythology, so I might draw some ideas for my character from things that I know about this, but most of that work's done for me. So from there, it's just kind of reacting to what the players say and letting that kind of build out the world depending on what they seem interested in.
I will say that like world building's really hard, like especially like in-depth world building. Like there's a reason that so many games are just really generic, boring fantasy landscapes. Because it's like it's difficult to create something that's really original. So sometimes you might just want to have something that is quite genre-y, like if it is fantasy or cyberpunk or whatever it is that you're doing, and just having that world sort of like exist in that sort of similar vibe to what people are usually used to, but then having certain elements or certain places or certain like bits of culture that are uniquely yours and are quite a bit more interesting than you'd usually find. Because oftentimes, if you make something that's completely different, then like there's a lot of explaining to the players as well, of like how this world works and what it is, and like you have a lot of questions that you need to be ready to answer, I think. Whereas if you've got something that they basically know how it works, but then there's just little elements where you're like, oh, that's interesting, that's cool, just sort of like adding a bit of fusion to it, like like almost like Shadowrun is that kind of blend of cyberpunk and fantasy. It's like maybe you can pick something that you don't normally see in this kind of setting that you're using, and try and think about how would it feel if this was an element of the society, like something that most people wouldn't necessarily be familiar with.
I think for me, I mean, I don't design campaigns from scratch. I don't do a lot of campaign stuff in general, because I find that it's a huge amount of pressure, particularly as the GM. I have done quite a few one-shot things, and for example, when I did some one-shots for Dread, which it says, do horror, but it doesn't give you like, this is the setting, this is the world. Like there are some, I think, free sort of story ideas you can find for the game, but I kind of ran with my own ideas, and because these are one shots, they're much more manageable, because you're like, okay, this is the set location, this is what's going to happen, and it doesn't need to be an enormous universe that you've made from scratch. Anyway, no one really makes anything from scratch. Like everything is inspired by something else. Nothing is really truly original, which is an important thing to consider. But the ones I did were just inspired by things I was into at the time. So like I was really into the video game System Shock and System Shock 2. So I made like a Dread campaign on a space station where people were doing like hacking, and there was an evil AI and stuff like that. So I just kind of like used it as an outlet to express my kind of, this is what I'm into at the moment, this is what I want to kind of share with other people. Now a lot of the time I just do it with character creation, so I make characters that are kind of inspired by ones that I really like from books I've read or films I've watched or whatever, because I've not, sometimes it's hard to find times to design like campaigns and one-shots and everything. So in terms of where to find inspiration, just you probably love stories because you engage with a lot of them. Like think about what you like at the moment, like what have you been reading, what have you been watching, like, and just tap into that. That's kind of what I do. I often use role-playing as like a method of further engaging with things that I like, or like doing like twists on things that I enjoy. So there you go.
That's good advice. That is all we have time for this week. But before we leave you, Wheels, what's coming up on youtube.com/Dicebreaker?
Well, Matt, by the time that this video has gone out, or this podcast rather, you will have seen on the channel, You've Never Played Santorini, which we mentioned during the start of the podcast. We also just did a painting stream where I'm going to be carrying on with this boy, if you're watching the video version, because I need to finish him up.
Still so big. It's such a big miniature.
Chongus. But tomorrow, if you're watching this when it comes out, we will have the 4th episode of our Soulbound campaign, Warhammer Age of Sigmar Soulbound RPG. And the day after, Lolies will be teaching us how to play Machi Koro, which is something that we've actually talked about quite a bit on the channel, actually, and on the podcast. So look out for that, and we'll see you on them.
Fantastic, thank you. Meanwhile, over on Dicebreaker.com, we already have up, as of this podcast, a review of Cyberpunk Red from Richard Jansen Pucks, chatting about the latest edition, which we've played a number of times now with Cody Pondsmith, who's kind enough to take us through. We will also have, maybe by the time this goes up, I'm waiting to hear on the specific time that we can show you this, a review of X-Men Mutant Insurrection. Which is the co-op game from Fantasy Flight Games, kind of based on Elder Sign, the dice game, but obviously about X-Men. Which sounds...
the X-Men.
Yeah, Samantha Nelson had a pretty good time of it, it seems. It seems like it does... It's pretty faithful to the comic books.
That's good to hear, because I like Elder Sign, and I like the X-Men, so...
Yeah, it sounds like it makes the most out of kind of your need to work together and kind of combine your powers. So yeah, it sounds pretty solid. We already have up, as of us recording this, but of course it's still on the website for you to go and read. Ben Burns went through the making of Eberron, which is where we ran our first Dungeon Breaker arc season, in fact, which was originally created in a contest in 2002, a cash prize contest, which Keith Baker, who would then go on to make Gloom, won, the card game Gloom. So it's, if you're not familiar with Eberron, it's kind of like steampunky fantasy in the world of D&D. But the story behind it is really interesting, and kind of what Keith went on to do, and some of the other kind of winners of the contest. We will have, probably next week, Alex Meehan chatting about Root to bring things full circle.
All roads lead to Root.
All roads do lead to Root.
It's more that Meehan's always talking about Root, so we might as well just shove a keyboard in front of us.
That's all you can type, Meehan. It's like Jack in The Shining. You're just typing
of that Root. Episode of Dexter's Laboratory where he can only say omelette du fromage. Because I'm a man of culture, man.
Yeah, of course. So Meehan, you'll be telling us why Root's world feels alive, why it comes alive, thanks to all its kind of different factions interacting, which is a very good piece, because I've already had the pleasure of reading it. So look forward to that.
Spoil it, Matt.
Showing off.
And also to give something that I wrote a little plug for once. I spoke to some folks about Call of Cthulhu in Japan and how it's actually bigger than Dungeons and Dragons in Japan, and that's kind of a fascinating combination of reasons that includes people using dating video games to play out their Call of Cthulhu campaigns using synthesized voices, and also an anime where the old ones make friends with a high schooler. For this confluence of reasons, Call of Cthulhu is absolutely huge in Japan, and is basically what D&D is to the US or the UK in terms of pure influence and being synonymous with tabletop role playing. Go check it out.
Sugoi desu. How interesting.
There's a lot more coming in the next week before we return with the podcast. But you'll have to look forward to that. Until we return next Friday, thank you, Wheels, for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alex Meehan.
You're doubly welcome.
I've been Matt Jarvis. Thank you for listening. Stay safe out there. Look after yourselves. And until we return, have a lovely day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.